At 2:47 a.m., flashing police lights shattered the quiet outside Keanu Reeves's home. Neighbors reported mysterious figures creeping in the shadows. Were they trespassers or something far more urgent? As officers arrived, what they uncovered would change everything. What was really happening behind Keanu's door that night? The truth will leave you speechless. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. At exactly 2:47 a.m., the stillness of the quiet residential street was abruptly broken by the sharp, flashing red and blue lights of police cars pulling up in front of Keanu Reeves' secluded home. The peaceful neighborhood, usually wrapped in silence this late at night, was now alive with the hum of engines and the crunch of tires on gravel. Neighbors, startled awake by the sudden commotion, pressed their faces to windows and peered anxiously through curtains, whispers of confusion spreading quickly from one house to another. Inside the vehicles, Officer Sarah Mitchell and her partner, Detective James Rodriguez, exchanged quick, serious glances. They had been dispatched following a series of calls from neighbors reporting suspicious activity on the property of a well-known celebrity. Multiple reports described shadowy figures moving quietly through the yard, flashlights flickering intermittently, and what sounded like the use of tools or equipment late into the night. The information was vague but concerning enough to warrant an immediate response. Both officers knew the unique challenges that came with responding to incidents at the homes of public figures. Privacy concerns, potential media attention, and the delicate balance between enforcing the law and respecting celebrity boundaries weighed heavily on their minds as they approached the front door. Still, they remained focused and professional, prepared for whatever they might encounter in the darkness. The large wooden door was illuminated faintly by the porch light as Sarah raised her hand and knocked firmly but politely. A moment later, the door swung open, revealing Keanu Reeves standing there in casual, loose-fitting pajamas. His hair was slightly tousled, and his eyes reflected a mixture of surprise and confusion at the sight of uniformed officers on his doorstep so late in the night. "Good evening, Mr. Reeves," Officer Mitchell said, keeping her tone calm and respectful. "We received calls from several neighbors reporting some unusual activity on your property. We just want to check in and make sure everything is all right." Keanu blinked slowly, taking in the situation. "Unusual activity? I wasn't aware of anything. I've been inside all evening," he replied softly but firmly. There was no trace of anger or alarm in his voice, just genuine puzzlement. Detective Rodriguez stepped forward, holding out a copy of the dispatch report. "There have been multiple reports of people moving around your backyard with flashlights and possibly tools, Mr. Reeves. We're here to investigate and ensure your safety and that of your neighbors." Keanu nodded slowly, still processing the unexpected turn of events. "I appreciate that. Please, come inside. I'd like to understand what's going on." The officers exchanged a brief look, recognizing the sincerity in his voice, and followed him inside without hesitation. Inside the spacious but warmly decorated home, Keanu led the officers to the living room. The subtle glow of a few lamps gave the room a comfortable ambiance, a contrast to the cold tension lingering outside. Keanu moved with a calmness that seemed to settle the atmosphere. "I haven't noticed anything unusual tonight," he said, gesturing toward the large windows overlooking the backyard. "But if there is something going on out there, I want to know about it." Officer Mitchell nodded, her eyes scanning the interior briefly but with respect for his space. "We're going to do a thorough check of the property, but your cooperation is appreciated. Sometimes these things turn out to be false alarms, but we have to take every report seriously." Keanu gave a small, understanding smile. "Of course, I understand. It's important to keep everyone safe." Detective Rodriguez glanced back toward the door, listening for any sounds from outside, but all was quiet for the moment. "Have you experienced any issues with security breaches before? Anything suspicious in recent weeks or months?" Keanu shook his head. "No. My security systems have always been reliable, and we haven't had any problems. This is the first I'm hearing of anything like this." The officers began their inspection, moving carefully through the main floor and toward the back entrance. Keanu walked alongside them, answering questions and pointing out security cameras, lighting timers, and alarm systems. The house felt like a sanctuary, a place Keanu clearly valued deeply. As they moved toward the back door, Officer Mitchell paused, looking out through the glass panes into the dark yard beyond. The moon cast long shadows over the neatly trimmed garden and outdoor furniture, everything seemingly in place. But the officer's trained eyes searched for any signs of disturbance, a misplaced object, footprints, or the faintest trace of recent human presence. Keanu stepped outside briefly, breathing in the cool night air. His expression grew thoughtful. "I can't imagine who would be here without my knowledge," he said quietly. "But if there are people outside, I want to make sure they're safe and not causing any harm." Detective Rodriguez's voice was low but firm. "That's what we're here to find out." The three of them moved carefully around the property perimeter. The officers swept their flashlights systematically, illuminating the hedges, the garden beds, and the corners where darkness could easily hide a person. Keanu followed closely, his steps deliberate but quiet, as though not to disturb anything that might be out of place. They noticed nothing immediately alarming, no signs of forced entry, no broken branches, no overturned objects. Yet the officers could sense a tension in the air, the weight of the unknown hanging heavily in the night. "We'll need to check the backyard thoroughly," Officer Mitchell said softly. "Sometimes people find ways to stay hidden, especially in places with dense landscaping." Keanu nodded and led them to the back garden gate, unlocking it to allow them passage. The garden was beautifully maintained, with flower beds lining the paths and small trees creating pockets of shadow. The night air smelled faintly of jasmine and earth. As they stepped into the backyard, the officers' beams swept slowly across the lawn and patio area. The furniture was arranged neatly, nothing disturbed. Yet, a faint rustling sound caught Sarah's attention. She directed her light toward the far corner, near a cluster of trees. There, moving carefully, were shadowy figures, silhouettes against the darkness. The group seemed small, perhaps 4 or 5 people, moving quietly, setting something down or arranging items. Their presence was deliberate but discreet, as if they did not want to be seen. Sarah's voice was calm but urgent. "Sir, we found some individuals on your property." Keanu's eyes widened, but he remained composed. "Let's see what's going on." The officers approached slowly, identifying themselves and asking the group to remain calm. The figures turned, revealing faces marked by weariness, but also a calm acceptance of the situation. There was no aggression, only cautious cooperation. Keanu stepped forward, addressing the group gently. "I wasn't aware anyone was staying here. Can you tell me what's happening?" The night held its breath, the mystery deepening. What they were about to discover behind Keanu Reeves's home would change everything, shifting from suspicion to something far more profound. Monday evening settled softly over Keanu Reeves' home. It was a rare kind of evening, one where the usual whirlwind of meetings, calls, and obligations was deliberately paused. Keanu had cleared his schedule early in the day, choosing to spend this night in quiet solitude. The decision was intentional, a chance to breathe, reflect, and simply be present in the calm of his own space. Walking through the rooms of his house, Keanu appreciated the silence that filled the air. The walls, lined with simple art and warm wood tones, held memories but did not weigh on him. The space was expansive but welcoming, a peaceful retreat from the demanding pace of his public life. Every corner seemed to invite calm. Soft cushions on the chairs, a gentle hum of the air purifier, faint sense of sandalwood from a burning candle. Keanu moved slowly, deliberately, enjoying the contrast between the noisy world outside and this peaceful refuge. His steps were unhurried, feet sliding softly over the hardwood floors. The quiet was not empty. It was full of stillness, a kind of presence he rarely allowed himself. The usual interruptions of his phone, messages, and calls were intentionally silenced. Tonight was for simplicity. He entered the kitchen, a space both functional and comforting. The counters gleamed softly under the warm light, and the familiar appliances stood ready. Keanu began preparing dinner. There was something meditative in the routine, the chopping of vegetables, the clink of utensils, the soft hiss of the stove. The process required no grand decisions or complicated strategies, just simple focus. As he peeled and sliced carrots and peppers, he felt the satisfying texture beneath his fingers. The rhythmic motions offered a grounding sense of calm, each cut measured and purposeful. The scent of fresh herbs filled the air as he added rosemary and thyme. The act of cooking became a quiet ritual, a moment of mindfulness in the day. Keanu found comfort in these small, ordinary tasks. They were a welcome reprieve from the constant thinking and planning that filled his work hours. This dinner was modest, a salad, some roasted vegetables, and brown rice. But it was made with intention and care. With dinner ready, Keanu sat at the small wooden table by the window. The fading light of dusk cast soft shadows across the room, and outside, the garden began to settle into evening rest. The silence outside was mirrored inside, creating a cocoon of peace. As he ate slowly, Keanu allowed his mind to wander. The quiet encouraged reflection on the things that mattered most: kindness, humility, the quiet strength found in compassion. These were not just ideals, but daily commitments. They had been shaped by his experiences, both joyful and difficult, and by the people who had touched his life along the way. After finishing, Keanu stood and moved toward his favorite reading chair. He reached for a well-worn book from the shelf, its cover soft from years of handling. The title was about compassion and the human spirit, a subject that resonated deeply with him. The lamp cast a warm glow as he settled into the chair, the weight of the book in his hands grounding him further in the moment. As he opened the pages, he began to read slowly, savoring the stories of people who had faced hardship, yet responded with kindness and resilience. The words spoke of courage, patience, and the power of empathy to change lives. They reminded Keanu of the importance of staying connected to what was real beneath the surface of fame and fortune. Even in struggle, people had the capacity to care deeply and to uplift one another. Reading like this was a rare pleasure. His busy schedule rarely allowed such uninterrupted time for quiet thought. The book was a gentle reminder that beneath the public image, he was still someone who valued connection and meaning above all else. The peaceful rhythm of reading filled the room as night deepened outside. The house seemed to breathe with him, steady and calm. After some time reading, Keanu gently closed the book and leaned back in his chair. His eyes rested on the soft patterns of shadow and light playing across the walls. The quiet in the house felt almost sacred, like a slow breath after a long race. Outside, the garden had settled into darkness. The flowers and plants were tucked away beneath the night's blanket, resting until dawn. The gentle rustling of leaves, stirred by a light evening breeze, whispered quietly, adding a calming rhythm to the stillness. Keanu allowed himself to sink fully into the calm. The silence was not empty. It was full of presence. It was the kind of silence where one could hear their own thoughts clearly, where the heart could speak softly without interruption. It was a rare moment, a gift of solitude that offered space to feel, to think, and to simply be. He thought about how infrequent such moments had become in his life. The whirlwind of fame, work, and public attention often left little room for genuine stillness. Those moments when he could escape the noise and expectations were precious and fleeting. Tonight was one of those rare nights, an evening carved out deliberately to find peace. This solitude was different from loneliness. It was a chosen refuge, a quiet sanctuary away from the endless demands of his public and private worlds. It was a place where he could reconnect with the core of who he was, beneath the surface, beneath the roles, the fame, the constant scrutiny. The house felt like a protector. Its walls held a sense of safety and comfort that few places outside of this space could offer. Here, the outside world's pressures faded into the background. Here, he could breathe deeply and let the tensions of the day slip away. Keanu's thoughts drifted to gratitude. Gratitude for this home, for the chance to create and work on things he loved, and for the people in his life who grounded him. Gratitude also for the lessons learned, those moments of struggle and growth that had shaped his journey. The quiet allowed him to hold these feelings without distraction, to acknowledge the richness of his experience. He considered his values: humility, kindness, compassion. These weren't abstract ideals, but living principles that guided him every day. In a world that often felt loud and superficial, these values were anchors. They reminded him of the importance of connection, of seeing others with empathy and respect. The night stretched quietly before him, full of possibility. Though the future was uncertain in many ways, Keanu felt a calm confidence rooted in this moment. He resolved to carry this peace with him, to let it inform his actions and choices, to remember that even amid chaos, there was always a place for quiet strength. He closed his eyes slowly, feeling the rhythm of his breath deepen. The weight of the day melted away with each exhale. The rare stillness wrapped around him like a gentle embrace, filling him with renewed energy and hope. As darkness fully claimed the sky outside, Keanu sat quietly in the soft glow of his lamp, centered and calm. The house, his refuge, held him gently. The night held promise. And in that promise was the power to face whatever lay ahead. As the evening deepened and the house settled into its nighttime rhythm, Keanu Reeves found himself increasingly aware of the quiet sounds that surrounded him. The soft ticking of the clock on the wall, the occasional creak of settling wood, and the gentle hum of the air conditioning were familiar and comforting. But there was something else, something less easy to explain, that caught his attention. It started with a faint rustling near one of the windows. At first, Keanu thought it might be a branch brushing against the glass or a leaf falling to the ground. He told himself it was nothing more than the normal sounds of a house nestled within a quiet neighborhood. But as he sat reading in his favorite chair, the sensation of being surrounded by subtle movement lingered in the back of his mind. There was a softness to the sounds, like footsteps muffled by grass or the careful shifting of something hidden just out of sight. The noises didn't seem random or accidental. They had a certain rhythm, a pattern that suggested intention. Keanu's curiosity was piqued, but he remained calm. He wasn't one to jump to conclusions or let imagination run wild. Still, his senses sharpened. He put down his book and listened more carefully, straining to catch any further details. The house was large and old enough that occasional creaks and groans were normal. But these new sounds felt different. Lighter, more deliberate, as if someone or something was moving through the shadows just beyond the edge of his vision. Keanu rose slowly and walked toward the window, peering into the darkness outside. The garden was cloaked in moonlight, familiar shapes softened by shadows. Nothing appeared out of place at first glance. The neatly trimmed bushes and flower beds stood silent, and the outdoor furniture remained arranged as he had left it that afternoon. Still, the feeling of subtle activity persisted. He noticed a small flicker of movement near the far edge of the property, something shifting among the trees. He blinked and refocused, but the shapes melted into the darkness before he could be certain what they were. Despite the uncertainty, Keanu was not alarmed. His experience had taught him to observe carefully and not to panic at the slightest disturbance. He understood that his mind could sometimes play tricks, especially when alone in a large, quiet house late at night. He moved away from the window, returning to his chair, yet his thoughts lingered on the sounds. What if someone was outside, A visitor, perhaps, or a neighbor passing through, or maybe even an animal. The possibilities were endless, but the sense of something deliberate was undeniable. Keanu resolved to keep his awareness keen without letting worry take hold. He knew the importance of balancing caution with calm. If there was something truly amiss, he would discover it with steady observation, not hasty reaction. As the night wore on, the faint noises continued sporadically. Occasionally, he would pause mid-sentence while reading, his attention caught by the slightest shuffle or whisper. The sounds seemed to come from different parts of the property at different times, adding to the mystery. These subtle sensory details created a growing sense of suspense. The quiet evening was no longer just peaceful. It held a secret waiting to be uncovered. Keanu remained poised, determined to understand what was unfolding quietly just beyond his doorstep. The following morning, Keanu awoke with a lingering sense of unease. Though the daylight transformed the shadows into harmless shapes, the subtle sounds from the previous night echoed in his mind. He rose slowly, moving through the house with deliberate calm, trying to shake off the feeling that something was different, something quietly unfolding while he slept. As he moved into the kitchen, he noticed small changes outside. A chair on the patio was no longer exactly where he remembered placing it. A garden tool that had been resting against the shed had shifted slightly. These small, almost imperceptible alterations caught his attention. They weren't drastic or alarming, but they were signs that someone, or something, had been present. Keanu stepped to the window and scanned the backyard carefully. The early morning sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled light on the lawn. To anyone else, the yard appeared untouched, peaceful. But to Keanu, who knew every detail of his property intimately, these tiny shifts told a different story. He found himself watching the yard more often than usual, eyes darting toward subtle movements in the bushes, or slight changes in the positions of outdoor furniture. He began to wonder whether his security cameras had been functioning properly. He recalled the reports from neighbors of unusual activity and questioned whether his systems might have missed something. Yet when he checked the surveillance feeds, everything appeared normal. No clear signs of intrusion or unauthorized presence. The cameras showed no movement during the night, no unexpected visitors crossing the property lines. It was as if the subtle sounds and minor changes had no visible cause. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, Keanu's instincts told him that something was happening. The pattern of noises and small rearrangements suggested intention rather than randomness. His mind began to piece together possibilities. A small group of people moving carefully around the property, perhaps trying not to be noticed. Or maybe someone seeking shelter or refuge. He didn't feel threatened, but the growing mystery demanded attention. Keanu valued privacy deeply, but he also had a compassionate nature that made him hesitate to jump to negative conclusions. The idea that someone might be quietly occupying his property without causing harm lingered in his thoughts. Throughout the day, Keanu's awareness heightened. He found himself pausing more often during conversations, distracted by a noise outside or a flicker of movement through a window. The house, usually a place of refuge, now felt filled with unspoken questions. By evening, the feeling had intensified. As darkness fell and the garden's contours softened beneath the night sky, Keanu settled into his usual routine. But the peace he sought was tempered by a cautious curiosity. He wondered who might be out there, what their intentions were, and how long they had been there. The night held its breath, and with it, so did Keanu. His senses stayed alert, listening for the faintest hint of movement, the softest whisper among the leaves. The subtle signs were becoming impossible to ignore. As night fell again, Keanu remained alert to every sound and shadow around his home. The subtle noises that had teased his awareness the previous evening returned, this time with a little more persistence. Soft footsteps brushed against gravel, faint whispers carried by the breeze, and occasional rustles of leaves. that seemed too deliberate to be mere wind. He sat quietly by a window, watching the darkened yard with focused eyes. The moonlight filtered gently through the branches, casting moving patterns on the ground. A cool night air stirred the trees, but the movements Keanu noticed did not fully match the natural sway of leaves or the sounds of animals. A slight flicker of light caught his eye. A flashlight beam sweeping carefully through the garden, moving slowly and precisely from one shadow to the next. It was not erratic or hurried, but methodical, as if someone was searching or tending to something with great care. Keanu's heart beat steadily, not from fear, but from a rising curiosity mixed with concern. He remained calm, reminding himself not to jump to conclusions or react hastily. Whatever was happening, it was quiet, respectful even, but undeniably present. He watched the subtle activity, noting how the movements seemed coordinated, purposeful. Figures moved with a soft confidence, familiar with the property's layout. It was as if they knew the place well and were taking care not to disturb anything more than necessary. The more Keanu observed, the stronger the sense grew that this was not a random intrusion or a careless trespass. The presence was organized, almost communal, hinting at a story unfolding quietly in the shadows of his own backyard. The night deepened, but Keanu's focus did not waver. The house around him felt both protective and fragile, a sanctuary threatened only by the mystery just beyond the glass. With the faint sounds continuing, he resolved to stay watchful without disturbing the fragile balance. The subtle signs were clues to a deeper truth he was only beginning to understand. The night held secrets, and Keanu knew that soon those secrets would reveal themselves. Tuesday morning arrived with soft light filtering through the curtains, casting a gentle glow across Keanu Reeves's bedroom. He woke slowly, the quiet of the house wrapping around him like a familiar blanket. Yet beneath the calm surface of the day, a quiet tension lingered in his mind. The sounds and subtle movements of the night before had left an impression that refused to fade. As he got up and moved toward the kitchen, Keanu felt the weight of a growing curiosity. Something was different about his home, but he couldn't yet put his finger on what. The house was still, peaceful, yet the feeling of an unseen presence hovered just beyond perception. Making his way through the kitchen, he prepared his morning coffee with practiced ease. The aroma of freshly ground beans filled the room, a small comfort in a day already marked by uncertainty. As he carried the warm mug to the window seat, his gaze turned outward to the backyard he knew so well. At first glance, everything appeared unchanged. The garden was neat, the grass freshly trimmed, and the flowers blooming in their usual colors. But then his eyes caught on something subtle, yet unmistakable. A chair, on the patio, was no longer where he remembered leaving it. It had been moved, slightly to the left, facing a different direction. Keanu frowned thoughtfully. The movement was too precise to be the work of wind or weather. It was a small detail, but it sparked a chain of observations. A cushion that had been folded neatly on a bench was now draped over the armrest. A small side table had shifted closer to the seating area. These minor alterations were puzzling. They suggested recent activity. Someone had been in the yard, moving through the space carefully and deliberately. Yet there was no sign of disorder or damage. The changes were subtle and respectful, as if whoever had been there wanted to leave the area tidy. Keanu's mind raced through possibilities. Was it a visitor who had come during the night? A gardener or landscaper? Or someone else, perhaps seeking shelter or refuge? The notion that someone might be quietly inhabiting his property without his knowledge stirred a mixture of concern and empathy within him. He took another sip of coffee, letting the warmth steady his thoughts. Despite the intrigue, he did not feel threatened. Instead, he found himself growing more attentive, more willing to observe and understand rather than react. The mystery deepened, and with it, his resolve to discover the truth. The house felt different now. Not quite his alone, but shared with unseen guests who moved with care. The subtle signs of their presence were whispers on the wind, and Keanu was determined to listen. As the morning progressed, Keanu found himself looking out the windows more often than usual. The backyard, usually a comforting and familiar sight, now felt charged with quiet secrets. Each glance revealed something new: a faint indentation in the grass, a leaf slightly out of place, a subtle shift in the arrangement of garden pots. He poured a second cup of coffee and moved to the living room, where large windows offered a clear view of the entire property. Sitting quietly, he scanned the grounds with focused eyes. His instincts told him that something was happening here, something he hadn't fully grasped yet. Keanu reflected on the reports he'd heard from neighbors over the past day, vague descriptions of movement and light in the darkness. Their concern was understandable, but from what he could see, there was no clear evidence of forced entry or damage. Instead, the signs pointed to careful, perhaps even respectful, presence. He found himself torn between a sense of unease and a growing empathy. The idea that someone might be using his property as a refuge stirred conflicting feelings. On one hand, there was the importance of security and privacy. On the other, there was compassion for those who might be struggling in ways he hadn't yet understood. Checking the security system on his phone, Keanu reviewed the footage from the previous night. The cameras had captured little beyond shadows and shifting light. There were no clear images of faces or movements, just flickers that suggested presence without revealing identity. His brow furrowed as he considered the possibility that the system might have blind spots. Could there be someone moving in areas not fully covered? Were there parts of his property vulnerable to unnoticed entry? Questions swirled in his mind, but he kept his composure. Keanu was no stranger to challenges, and he preferred to face uncertainty with patience and observation rather than rash action. Throughout the morning, he maintained a quiet vigilance. His thoughts returned often to the subtle signs, the rearranged furniture, the soft noises, the shifting shadows. These were pieces of a puzzle he was only beginning to assemble. The atmosphere in the house was different now. It was no longer just his home, but a space shared, at least temporarily, with others. The presence was invisible but tangible, like a quiet current running beneath the surface. Keanu understood that this unfolding situation required careful attention. He would need to remain watchful, open, and ready to act, with both caution and kindness. As the day unfolded, Keanu's awareness deepened. The usual comfort of his home was replaced by a heightened attentiveness to every small detail. Though no strangers were visible, the atmosphere felt charged, as if the house itself was quietly holding its breath, aware of unseen guests moving just beyond view. He wandered through the rooms, often pausing by windows to peer into the yard. The garden looked well cared for, but the subtle signs, the moved chair, the slight disturbance in the flower beds, spoke of recent presence. Each tiny clue built upon the last, painting a picture of careful, ongoing activity. Keanu began to question whether his security measures were fully effective. The cameras and alarms had shown nothing definitive, yet the evidence of human touch was undeniable. He resolved to review his system thoroughly and consider upgrades if needed, not out of fear but to better understand what was happening. Still, despite the mystery, Keanu's heart remained open. He did not feel anger or violation, only a complex mixture of curiosity and concern. The thought of someone quietly occupying his space without causing harm stirred empathy within him. He understood hardship and the search for safety more deeply than most. The house, once a private sanctuary, had become a shared space in an unexpected way. Keanu's thoughts turned to those who might be living quietly on the margins, invisible to most, but present nonetheless. He wondered who they were, what stories they carried, and how they had come to seek shelter here. The day faded into evening, but the quiet tension held. Keanu settled once more by the window, eyes fixed on the darkening yard. The subtle signs continued. A soft shuffle, the flicker of light, reminding him that the night would reveal more. He breathed deeply, accepting the unknown with steady calm. The mystery was unfolding slowly, and he would meet it with patience, respect, and a readiness to listen. Tuesday evening settled over Keanu Reeves's home like a soft, dark blanket. The house was quiet, filled only with the faint sounds of the night. Distant crickets, the whisper of leaves in the breeze, the occasional hum of an air conditioner. Keanu moved slowly through the rooms, feeling the growing weight of the strange events unfolding around him. Each day seemed to bring new, subtle clues, little signs that someone was nearby, yet still hidden. As he approached the back garden, something caught his eye. An outdoor light near the far corner of the yard was glowing softly, casting a warm yellowish hue on the surrounding plants and stone path. It was unusual. This light was supposed to remain off at this hour. The automatic timer was set to activate it only at dusk, and then turn it off well before midnight. Keanu furrowed his brow and stepped closer, curiosity turning quickly to concern. He reached out and pressed the switch, but the light stayed on, unwavering. This was no simple malfunction. The light was clearly operating outside its programmed schedule. His mind raced with questions. Who had access to the timer controls? Had someone deliberately changed the settings? If so, why? The idea that someone with knowledge of his home's systems was present on his property was unsettling. Keanu went to the control panel inside the house, located near the kitchen, and accessed the outdoor lighting system. The screen displayed the timer settings, and it was clear that the schedule had been altered. The light near the garden had been set to turn on during late-night hours, times when the yard should have been dark and undisturbed. He ran his fingers along the control panel, eyes scanning for clues. The changes were not random. They required a deliberate action, a clear understanding of how the system worked. This was no accident or simple glitch. It was a technical breach. Keanu felt a mix of emotions swirling within him. There was concern for his privacy and security. Someone had interfered with his home settings, potentially to create visibility or to signal others. But alongside the worry was a growing intrigue. Whoever was behind this had taken care not to cause damage or disturbance. The light's activation seemed purposeful, perhaps a way to illuminate part of the yard for a reason. He wondered about their intent. Was this an attempt to see more clearly in the dark, to guide others, or maybe to keep watch over the space they occupied? The light was a beacon in the night, a deliberate marker of presence. Despite the unease, Keanu did not feel panic. He was accustomed to challenges and surprises, and his mind remained focused on understanding rather than fear. The subtle signs of careful activity suggested people who knew the importance of discretion, but also needed certain measures to be in place. Keanu stepped back from the control panel, looking out toward the glowing garden light. The night was no longer silent or empty. It was alive with questions and mysteries that begged to be solved. As Keanu stood by the control panel, a sense of determination settled over him. This wasn't just about a light or a minor adjustment. It was evidence that someone was actively present, interacting with his home in ways he hadn't anticipated. The quiet signs he had noticed over the past days now took on a new, more urgent meaning. He returned to the window overlooking the backyard, watching as the garden light continued to cast its glow over the neatly arranged plants and stone path. The contrast between the soft light and the darkness beyond created an almost surreal atmosphere, part comfort, part mystery. Keanu's thoughts circled around the possibilities. Who had the knowledge and access to alter the system? It wasn't something a casual intruder could manage without expertise. This suggested someone familiar with the property or with technical skills to bypass security. He reflected on the earlier subtle movements and rearrangements he had observed, the shifted furniture, the faint sounds in the night. Now, with this deliberate change to the lighting, it became clear that this was a planned presence, not random trespassing. Despite his growing concerns, Keanu's mind remained open. He wasn't quick to judge or react with hostility. Instead, he allowed space for understanding. Whoever was there might have reasons beyond mere intrusion, perhaps seeking shelter, safety, or refuge from difficult circumstances. The idea that people could be quietly living on his property, caring for it even in small ways, stirred empathy. Keanu was no stranger to hardship himself, and his compassionate nature compelled him to consider the situation from a human perspective. He decided to be vigilant but patient. He would monitor the situation carefully, gather information, and avoid confrontation until he understood more. This approach aligned with his values, caution paired with kindness. Later that evening, as darkness deepened, Keanu continued his quiet watch from the window. The garden light illuminated a small area, revealing faint shadows moving gently among the bushes. The figures seemed aware of their surroundings, moving carefully to avoid detection, but showing no signs of disorder or disrespect. The scene was haunting and peaceful at once, a quiet presence living in the margins, balancing invisibility with subtle assertions of existence. Keanu felt a mix of emotions, curiosity, concern, and a deepening desire to learn who these people were and why they had chosen his home. The backyard light, once a simple fixture, had become a symbol, a small beacon casting light on a mystery that was growing more profound with each passing hour. As the night deepened, Keanu remained by the window, his eyes fixed on the softly glowing garden light. The gentle illumination revealed shadows, moving with quiet purpose, figures who knew their surroundings well and tread lightly on the earth beneath them. The light did not reveal much, only fleeting glimpses of shapes shifting between the bushes and garden beds, but it was enough to confirm what he had begun to suspect. These were not careless intruders. The movements beneath the glow were deliberate and coordinated, carried out with a care that spoke of respect for the space they occupied. They seemed to understand the balance required to remain unseen by neighbors, yet maintain a safe, livable area for themselves. It was as if the light itself was a signal, a small sanctuary in the darkness where they could move with some degree of security. Keanu's concern about privacy and safety remained, but it was joined by a growing sense of curiosity and empathy. Who were these people quietly inhabiting his backyard? What circumstances had brought them here? The altered timer setting showed technical knowledge and intention. They weren't simply hiding. They were adapting, making adjustments to suit their needs. He thought about how careful their presence had been so far. The neat arrangement of furniture, the absence of damage, the quietness that defied the chaos often associated with unauthorized occupation. These subtle details painted a picture of dignity amidst hardship. Keanu found himself moved by the quiet resilience these actions suggested. The technical breach, the deliberate change to the lighting system, was not just about visibility, but about survival. Perhaps the light was used to navigate safely after dark, or to mark a gathering place for the group. Whatever the reason, it demonstrated their ability to blend knowledge with discretion. Keanu remained silent, watching as shadows continued their slow, measured movements beneath the lamp's glow. The night air was cool but still, the atmosphere charged with an unspoken tension that was not fear but anticipation. This was a delicate situation unfolding before him, one that called for patience and understanding. His mind circled around possibilities. People displaced, seeking refuge, trying to preserve their dignity in difficult circumstances. The thought stirred his compassion deeply. Keanu was no stranger to life's hardships and had always believed in meeting them with kindness rather than judgment. The glowing backyard light had become a beacon not only in the physical sense but also symbolically. a light illuminating a hidden story, a silent call for attention to lives lived quietly in the margins. It was a reminder that sometimes what goes unseen holds the most profound truths. As Keanu finally turned away from the window to prepare for bed, a quiet resolve settled within him. This was no longer just an intrusion to be dismissed. It was a situation that demanded respect and, perhaps, his involvement. The mystery of the backyard light had deepened, and with it, the story that was waiting to unfold. Keanu knew that soon, he would need to step beyond observation and into action. What happened next would change everything. Wednesday morning dawned with a soft, pale light filtering through the curtains of Keanu Reeves's home. The quiet hum of early birds mingled with the gentle rustle of leaves outside, creating a peaceful backdrop for what was about to become another day full of discovery. Keanu awoke, feeling the weight of the past day's strange events, the subtle signs of presence lingering in his mind like an unanswered question. After a brief morning routine, Keanu stepped into the kitchen to prepare coffee. The warmth of the steam rising from the cup brought a moment of comfort, but his thoughts were already drawn to the backyard. There was a persistent pull to see the space that had become the stage for this unfolding mystery. Carrying his cup, he moved toward the large windows that overlooked the garden. From inside, the yard looked tranquil and inviting, bathed in the gentle light of early morning. But something was different. His trained eyes quickly noticed a shift in the arrangement of the outdoor furniture. The chairs and benches, once scattered in quiet disarray, had been gathered into purposeful seating areas. Cushions were neatly placed, and small tables had been positioned thoughtfully between them. The setup seemed designed to accommodate a group, inviting conversation and connection. It was a small but profound detail, a space arranged for togetherness rather than isolation. Keanu's eyebrows knitted in surprise and contemplation. This was no sign of careless trespassing or vandalism. The neatness and care suggested respect and intention. Whoever had been here was treating the property as if it were their own, or at least as a place worthy of consideration. His mind revisited the nights filled with soft sounds, the faint light glowing in the garden, the careful movements beneath it. These signs now converged into a clearer picture. This was a group, organized and mindful, not random wanderers or disruptive intruders. The idea stirred something deep in Keanu, a blend of empathy and concern. He thought about the people who might be behind this quiet occupation. What were their stories? What hardships had led them here? The thought of someone seeking shelter, even in such unusual circumstances, touched his heart. He sipped his coffee slowly, eyes still fixed on the backyard. The morning air seemed to carry a new weight, one of potential connection and understanding. The mystery occupants were no longer faceless shadows. They were humans with dignity and purpose. Keanu felt an urge to learn more, to approach this situation with the compassion he believed everyone deserved. But he also recognized the importance of caution and respect for both himself and the people who had chosen this place as a refuge. As the morning progressed, Keanu continued to observe the backyard from different angles in his home. Each vantage point revealed more evidence of careful occupation. A small garden tool left neatly beside the flower beds, a folded blanket placed gently over the back of a chair. Nothing was out of place or damaged. Instead, every item appeared deliberately arranged with a sense of respect for the space. Keanu's thoughts shifted from suspicion toward empathy. He understood that the people who had been here were doing their best to maintain order and dignity, even in difficult circumstances. Their care for the property was a reflection of their own self-respect, a quiet assertion of humanity in a world that often overlooked them. He thought about the effort it must take to live in such conditions, making a temporary home out of what little they had while trying to avoid trouble or attention. The neatness of the furniture arrangement, the absence of any signs of destruction, showed that this was more than survival. It was about maintaining pride. Keanu remembered the soft sounds and flickering lights from the previous nights. These new signs made it clear that the occupants were mindful not to disrupt their surroundings. Their presence was deliberate but discreet, considerate of the home and the neighborhood. Extending her hand, his concern grew alongside his compassion. There was the natural desire to protect his property, but it was now tempered by an understanding of the human stories behind these quiet intrusions. These were people facing hardships, seeking shelter and safety in a world that often turned away. Keanu felt a stirring responsibility, not just to guard his home, but to respond with kindness. He knew that appearances could be deceiving, and that beneath the mystery were lives worth knowing and supporting. He poured another cup of coffee and leaned against the window frame, letting the morning sun warm his face. The backyard was still, but the atmosphere had shifted. It was no longer simply a space he owned. It was a place shared, at least for now, with others navigating their own struggles. This realization deepened Keanu's connection to the unfolding situation. He resolved to watch carefully, but also to listen with an open heart. The quiet care shown by these visitors deserved recognition, not judgment. The morning hours slipped by, each moment adding layers to the story taking shape beyond his walls. Keanu prepared to step forward, not with confrontation, but with understanding. Later that morning, Keanu stepped outside to get a closer look. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of freshly watered earth and blooming flowers. He moved quietly through the garden, noticing how the seating areas invited conversation. Chairs grouped in gentle arcs, cushions placed for comfort, and small tables set as if for shared meals or stories. There was no sign of haste or disorder. Every piece of furniture seemed arranged with thought and care, reflecting the rhythms of people creating a temporary home. The neatness contradicted everything Keanu expected from trespassers or vandals. Instead, it suggested a community grounded in respect, for themselves, for each other, and for the space they occupied. Keanu's heart softened as he imagined who might have made this place theirs, even briefly. He pictured individuals, perhaps facing hardship or displacement, striving to preserve dignity despite their circumstances. The quiet dignity of their presence stirred something profound within him. He thought about the nights he had spent watching from the windows, the shadows moving carefully, the light flickering softly, the sounds that had once unsettled him but now felt like whispers of resilience. These people were not just visitors, they were survivors, crafting a space of safety in a world that often ignored them. Keanu felt a surge of empathy mingled with a growing resolve. He understood the fragile balance they maintained, living quietly but purposefully, and the courage it took to do so. The garden was no longer just his sanctuary. It had become a refuge for others. As he turned to head back inside, Keanu's mind was filled with questions and possibilities. He knew he could not ignore what was happening. This situation called for compassion, for thoughtful action grounded in respect. The morning sun climbed higher, casting warm light across the yard. The signs of careful occupation were clear, and Keanu felt ready to meet the mystery occupants, not as intruders, but as people. His quiet observation had evolved into a heartfelt connection. The story unfolding in his backyard was no longer a mystery, but a human experience, waiting to be understood and embraced. Wednesday night descended quietly over Keanu Reeves's home, cloaking the garden in darkness and soft shadows. The moon hung low, casting a silver glow over the trees and shrubs that bordered the backyard. Inside, Keanu sat by the window, eyes fixed on the faint outlines beyond the glass. Hours of watching had sharpened his senses. He was alert to every sound, the rustle of leaves, the whisper of the wind, the soft steps on grass. Tonight, the subtle signs he had been tracking over the past days began to take on a more tangible form. A movement caught his eye near the edge of the property, where the trees stood thick and tall. Shadowy figures slipped silently between the trunks, careful not to break the stillness of the night. Their steps were light, their gestures deliberate, as if they had moved through this terrain many times before. Keanu's breath caught in his throat. He watched as the group moved in unison, a close, kit-knit unit navigating the darkness with practiced ease. It was clear these were not random wanderers or careless trespassers. Their familiarity with the land suggested a deep knowledge of the property's layout and features. The figures communicated in subtle ways, a glance, a slight gesture, coordinating their movements without sound. They moved quickly yet cautiously, aware of the need for discretion. It was as if they were performing a delicate dance beneath the moonlight, balancing presence with invisibility. Keanu's mind raced with questions. Who were these people? What brought them here? Why had they chosen his home as a place to move quietly through the shadows? Despite the uncertainty, there was a rhythm to their actions, a purpose that intrigued and moved him. He remained silent and still, not wanting to startle or confront the group prematurely. His heart beat steadily, a mix of anticipation and empathy rising within him. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the first clear glimpse of the mystery occupants. The scene was both haunting and beautiful, a testament to resilience and human connection in the face of hardship. Keanu felt a surge of respect for the careful way they navigated his property, treating it with the reverence it deserved. He wrestled with what to do next. Should he approach them now? Wait for more clarity? The weight of responsibility pressed gently on him. He wanted to honor their dignity while ensuring his own boundaries were respected. As the figures disappeared deeper into the shadows, Keanu sat back, absorbing the moment. The night had revealed more than he expected. It had unveiled lives intertwined with his own, space, in ways both delicate and profound. Keanu remained at the window, eyes trained on the shadowy figures moving carefully through the trees. The way they navigated the darkness spoke volumes. These were not strangers, fumbling blindly, but people who had spent time learning every path, every hiding place, every safe spot on the property. Their familiarity was evident in the fluidity of their movements, the quiet confidence that came from knowing the land intimately. They moved as a group, coordinated without words. One figure would pause, glance back, and another would adjust their pace. It was a silent conversation, a shared understanding that kept them in sync. This cohesion suggested a community bonded by trust and mutual care, rather than random individuals thrown together by circumstance. Keanu felt a deepening connection to these people, a recognition that beneath the mystery were lives shaped by hardship and resilience. Their careful presence reflected respect for the space they occupied and for the people who owned it. It was a delicate balance, finding shelter without intrusion, living quietly without causing harm. The night air carried a stillness that magnified every small sound, the soft crunch of footsteps on gravel, the occasional rustle of a branch, the distant call of a night bird. Keanu listened intently, absorbing the atmosphere with a mix of wonder and concern. He wrestled with his emotions. The instinct to protect his home clashed with a growing empathy for those seeking refuge. They were vulnerable, yet remarkably strong in their unity and care. Keanu's heart urged him to reach out, to offer help rather than confrontation. But caution prevailed. He knew this was a delicate situation requiring sensitivity and respect. Any sudden action could frighten or alienate the people he was beginning to understand. Patience and observation were his allies now. The figures continued their quiet passage, moving deeper into the garden. Keanu watched as they paused near the outdoor furniture he had noticed rearranged earlier. They gathered briefly, exchanging muted words and gestures, maintaining the order and respect that had become so clear. In this moment, Keanu's perception shifted. The mystery occupants were no longer distant shadows, but a community woven together by circumstance and care. They were living proof of humanity's capacity to adapt and endure. Keanu leaned back from the window, a thoughtful calm settling over him. The night had brought clarity and a new level of emotional tension, a connection that bound him to these unseen neighbors in a way words could not yet express. He knew the coming days would demand courage and kindness. This silent encounter had opened a door, revealing a story waiting to be told and lives waiting to be acknowledged. As the figures melted deeper into the shadows, Keanu remained rooted by the window, lost in silent contemplation. The night air was cool, the stillness profound, broken only by the faint sounds of the group moving carefully across the property. He felt an unfamiliar mixture of emotions swelling inside him: curiosity, concern, and an unexpected warmth of connection. The man thought, if he didn't, The careful coordination of the visitors, their quiet respect for the grounds, and their evident community spoke to something more than mere survival. Keanu saw resilience in their actions, dignity in their presence, and an unspoken story of hardship and hope woven into the night. He grappled with what to do next. Part of him wanted to reach out immediately to bridge the distance and offer understanding, but another part urged patience. This was delicate territory. The visitors had chosen this quiet refuge for a reason, and any sudden movement could disrupt the fragile balance they maintained. Keanu's mind raced with questions. Who were these people? What had brought them here? What stories did they carry with them? Despite the mystery, a thread of empathy ran deep within him, reminding him of his own experiences with kindness and the power of quiet support. He took a steadying breath, grounding himself in the moment. This encounter marked a turning point, not just in the unfolding story, but in his own heart. The silent watchers beneath the moonlight were no longer strangers, but neighbors in need, deserving of respect and care. The night stretched on, full of possibilities yet to be revealed. Keanu closed the window gently, his resolve firm. Whatever came next, he would face it with compassion and openness. The first visual confirmation had deepened the emotional tension and forged a connection that would change everything. Thursday morning arrived with a fresh light that streamed gently through the windows of Keanu Reeves's home. As he awoke, the events of the previous days played softly through his mind. His curiosity and concern about the quiet presence in his backyard had deepened, weaving into a tapestry of questions and growing empathy. After his morning routine, Keanu made his way to the kitchen, where the aroma of fresh coffee offered a familiar comfort. Holding his mug, he moved toward the large windows that overlooked the garden. He paused, taking in the view with a more attentive eye than usual. What greeted him was unexpected. The garden, once filled with scattered leaves and untended patches, now appeared cared for with a delicate touch. The flower beds looked weeded, the soil freshly turned. The plants were upright and vibrant, some with a light sheen of water on their leaves. Small piles of garden debris had been gathered and removed. Keanu's gaze swept across the yard, noting the subtle changes that spoke of regular attention. The grass seemed freshly mowed, the edges trimmed neatly. Even the pathways looked swept clean of stray leaves and dirt. The transformation was quiet, but thorough, an unmistakable sign of care. His heart stirred at the sight. These were not signs of careless intrusion or neglect, but evidence of people investing effort into maintaining the space. Someone had taken the time and energy to tend this garden as if it were their own. Keanu thought about the late-night figures he had seen moving silently through the trees. Now it made sense. They weren't merely passing through or hiding. They were creating a refuge, a home-like environment in the midst of uncertainty. The professionalism in the gardening spoke volumes. This was a group with pride and respect, people who valued the beauty and peace the garden offered. It was a place of solace, a small patch of normalcy in lives that had likely been anything but. Keanu felt a deepening respect for these quiet caretakers. Their actions revealed a dignity that transcended circumstance. The garden was no longer just a patch of earth. It was a symbol of resilience and hope. He sipped his coffee slowly, letting the reality sink in. The presence in his backyard was more than a trespass. It was a fragile human story unfolding in real time. This revelation stirred complex feelings in Keanu, a mix of admiration for their efforts and protective concern for their safety. The morning air seemed to carry a gentle invitation, as if the garden itself was calling for understanding and connection. Keanu knew that his role in this story was changing, evolving toward something more involved. Keanu stepped outside to take a closer look at the garden, the cool morning air brushing against his skin. The sunlight highlighted the fresh work, the trimmed hedges, the cleared flower beds, and the carefully watered plants sparkling with droplets from an early mist. The scene felt peaceful, almost serene. Walking slowly along the stone path, Keanu noticed the absence of any trash or debris that might be expected if the area had been occupied by trespassers. Instead, the ground was neat, the flower beds free of weeds, and the small shrubs pruned with attention. It was clear that whoever had been here cared deeply about maintaining this space. He paused by a small patch of wildflowers, their petals bright and healthy. A nearby watering can sat neatly beside a bench, as if someone had just set it down after tending the plants. The tools were clean, arranged thoughtfully. No signs of neglect or disorder. This was more than casual gardening. The work had been done with skill and dedication, reflecting a desire to nurture and protect. Keanu's mind traced back to the shadows and quiet footsteps he had seen over the past nights. The people who had been here were not simply hiding, they were creating a home, however temporary. "It's not sighting," he said. The thought moved him deeply. These were individuals who had chosen his property not as a place to take, but as a place to give, to care for, to honor. It was a silent declaration of their humanity and their will to survive with dignity. Keanu's feelings of empathy grew stronger. The evidence of their efforts painted a portrait of resilience, courage, and quiet strength. They had made a refuge of his garden, transforming it through small acts of care and respect. But alongside his admiration was a growing sense of responsibility. He realized that this situation required more than observation. The people quietly living on his land deserved recognition, understanding, and help. He knew the days ahead would challenge him to balance concern for his property with compassion for the lives intertwined with it. This was no longer just a mystery to watch unfold. It was a call to action. Keanu took a deep breath and looked around once more. The garden was alive with new purpose, a symbol of hope and quiet perseverance. It was clear that the story unfolding here was far greater than he had imagined. Keanu stayed longer in the garden, taking slow, deliberate steps along the pathways now clearly cared for by unseen hands. Every detail told a story. Edges trimmed with precision, flower beds free of weeds, and freshly watered plants standing tall and vibrant. The garden was alive with subtle signs of respect and tenderness, an oasis carefully tended despite its unofficial occupants. He paused by a small bench where a folded blanket and a neatly stacked pile of books rested. The scene spoke of moments spent in quiet reflection, of attempts to create comfort and normalcy amidst uncertainty. Nearby, a watering can lay on its side, the faint scent of earth and greenery filling the air. Keanu's thoughts wandered to the lives woven quietly into this space. These people had made this garden their temporary home, shaping it with patience and care. Their presence was a silent testament to resilience, a community striving to hold on to dignity even when the world offered little. The respect they showed for his property contrasted sharply with the stereotypes he had once held about trespassers or those living on the margins. This was a group defined by quiet strength, mindful not to disturb what wasn't theirs, yet caring deeply for the space they inhabited. He imagined the challenges they faced each day, finding safety, managing scarcity, and maintaining hope. The garden had become a refuge, a place where they could nurture life and spirit even in hardship. Keanu's empathy deepened, mingled with a rising sense of responsibility. This was no longer a situation he could observe from afar. It called for action, grounded in understanding and compassion. The garden was more than earth and plants now. It was a symbol of survival and community. It embodied the delicate balance between vulnerability and strength, invisibility and presence. Keanu felt the weight of this realization as he walked slowly back toward the house. The morning light cast long shadows, but also revealed the beauty born of care and intention. He resolved to meet this story not with judgment, but with kindness. The people who had transformed his garden deserved recognition, support, and respect. Returning indoors, Keanu's heart was heavy, but hopeful. The mystery had evolved into a shared human experience, one that would change him as much as it might change those quietly living just beyond his door. The days ahead promised challenges, but also the possibility of connection and healing. Keanu was ready to face them with an open heart and steady resolve. Thursday evening arrived with a gentle coolness, the kind that softened the edges of the day and invited quiet reflection. Keanu Reeves sat by the window, watching the fading light give way to twilight. The garden outside, which had shown signs of care and attention throughout the day, now began to transform in another way. Through the dimming light, Keanu observed shadowy figures moving with purpose and precision. They were the same people he had glimpsed before, now working together to set up a camp within the protected privacy of his backyard. The group moved silently, almost reverently, as they unpacked materials and arranged their temporary shelter. Tents were unfurled carefully, poles snapped into place with practiced hands, and sleeping bags spread neatly inside. The process was efficient and deliberate, revealing skills honed by experience and necessity. Every action was measured to minimize noise and disruption, respecting the quiet neighborhood and the sanctity of the space. Keanu noticed how the group arranged their belongings with attention to order and cleanliness. Supplies were stacked thoughtfully, and a small area was cleared to make space for cooking and gathering. The setup was not hurried or chaotic, but marked by discipline and cooperation. It was clear this was a community used to working together, supporting one another through challenges that required resilience and resourcefulness. Their survival skills were evident in how they transformed an ordinary garden into a safe haven, even if temporary. Keanu's heart swelled with a mixture of admiration and compassion. He saw people striving not just to survive, but to create a semblance of home, a place where dignity could be maintained amid uncertainty. The group's respect for the property was apparent in every detail. They avoided trampling delicate plants, kept their fire pit small and contained, and were careful to minimize any impact on the environment. This was not the careless behavior often associated with trespassers. It was mindful stewardship born of necessity and care. As the campsite took shape beneath the soft glow of the garden light, Keanu felt a growing connection to these visitors. They were no longer shadows or unknown presences, but people with stories, struggles, and hopes. This quiet scene set the stage for the deeper understanding Keanu was beginning to reach. The mystery was unfolding gently, revealing humanity in its most vulnerable and resilient forms. Keanu continued to watch as the group moved with quiet efficiency through the backyard. Each person seemed to know their role, working in harmony to create a space that was both functional and respectful. There was no hurry, only a steady rhythm that spoke of practiced teamwork and deep familiarity with such tasks. One person unfolded a tarp, anchoring it carefully between trees to serve as a shelter from the elements. Another arranged a small pile of firewood nearby, stacking it neatly for easy access. The group worked together seamlessly, exchanging glances and silent gestures that kept the process smooth and coordinated. Keanu's attention was drawn to the care they took in protecting the plants and garden features. They avoided stepping on flower beds, and moved cautiously to keep pathways clear. It was clear they understood the importance of preserving the space they had chosen as their refuge. The campsite itself was simple but effective. Tents formed a small circle, creating a communal area in the center where the group could gather, share meals, or rest. The arrangement fostered a sense of togetherness, a small community built on mutual support and shared experience. Watching this, Keanu felt a profound respect for their resilience. These were people who had faced hardship but refused to lose their dignity. They had adapted, creating a home where few would expect to find one. The group's discipline was evident not just in their setup, but in their behavior. They spoke softly, moved carefully, and maintained an awareness of the neighborhood's quiet rhythms. Their presence was discreet, considerate of others even in their own struggle. Keanu's mind turned to the stories they carried with them, stories of survival, loss, and hope. He imagined the strength it took to maintain order and kindness in such conditions, to build community in the face of adversity. The scene before him was a powerful reminder of humanity's capacity for endurance and compassion. It challenged assumptions and called for empathy beyond judgment. As the evening deepened and the garden light continued to cast its glow, Keanu's heart opened further. He felt compelled to understand these people, to see beyond their circumstances and recognize their shared humanity. The quiet camp in his backyard was no longer just a mystery. It was a living testament to resilience, care, and the search for belonging. As twilight deepened into night, the group finished setting up their small campsite with remarkable care and quiet efficiency. Keanu watched closely from the window as the final tents were pitched, their fabric stretched taut and secured firmly against the soft evening breeze. Each person moved with purpose, the fluid coordination revealing how familiar they were with this routine. The campsite, though modest, had a sense of order and calm that caught Keanu's attention. Blankets and sleeping bags were folded and arranged neatly inside the tents. Small personal items, worn books, a few cooking utensils, a carefully wrapped bundle of clothing, were placed thoughtfully to keep the space tidy. Nothing was left scattered or abandoned. It was clear this was a temporary home made with dignity and respect. Keanu's gaze softened as he observed the subtle interactions between the group. One man carefully swept the area around the fire pit, gathering stray leaves and twigs to prevent sparks from spreading. Another checked the extinguished campfire, ensuring it was safe before moving on to arrange a small cooking area. The care with which they tended their surroundings spoke volumes about their character. Their whispers were low and gentle, words exchanged with trust and familiarity. The group seemed bound together not only by circumstance, but by a deep sense of community. They shared responsibility for the space and for each other. Their movements harmonized like parts of a well-oiled machine. There was no chaos or confusion, only steady teamwork born of necessity and respect. Keanu felt a profound sense of empathy swell within him. These people, likely forced from traditional homes by hardship, were doing everything in their power to maintain their humanity. Their actions revealed strength and resilience that transcended the stigma often attached to homelessness or displacement. He thought about the contrast between the struggles they must face daily and the care they took to create this peaceful refuge in his backyard. Their presence was not just survival, it was an act of courage and hope. They had transformed an ordinary space into a place of safety and belonging, even if just for a brief moment. The quiet dignity of the campsite stirred something deep in Keanu's heart. It reminded him that behind every unknown face was a story worth hearing, a life deserving of respect. The realization filled him with both sorrow and determination. Sorrow for the hardships they endured, and determination to find a way to help. Keanu's mind drifted to the coming days and the choices he would face. This was no longer a distant mystery. It was a living reality that demanded compassion and action. The gentle glow of the campfire flickered against the darkness, casting warm light on faces etched with hardship, but also marked by hope. As the night deepened, Keanu quietly closed the curtains, his thoughts heavy, yet resolute. The stage was set for a deeper understanding, a story waiting to unfold that would touch lives in unexpected ways. As Keanu observed the group more closely over the following days, he began to notice the distinct roles each person assumed within their small community. It was clear they had developed an organized system to manage their shared space and responsibilities, a necessity born from both their circumstances and their commitment to each other. At the center of the group's coordination was an older man with a calm presence and steady demeanor. He moved with quiet authority, overseeing the daily activities and ensuring tasks were divided fairly. His eyes held the weight of experience, years spent navigating difficult terrain, both literal and figurative. Keanu watched as this man, whom he mentally named Frank, made decisions with care, always consulting with others before finalizing plans. Frank's role extended beyond mere logistics. He was a leader in the truest sense, fostering cooperation and respect among the group members. His voice was gentle but firm, a steadying force that balanced compassion with practical wisdom. Keanu admired the way Frank managed to maintain harmony in a situation that would challenge even the strongest bonds. Nearby, a younger man attended to basic medical needs within the group. Keanu noticed him carefully inspecting a minor injury on one of the women, applying a clean cloth and speaking softly to soothe pain. This medic, whom Keanu thought of as Sam, carried himself with quiet confidence and a nurturing spirit. His knowledge of first aid and his attentiveness were vital in a place without formal health care. Sam's role went beyond treating wounds. He checked on the group members regularly, monitoring their health and offering advice to prevent minor issues from becoming serious problems. Keanu realized that in their fragile situation, Sam's skills were not just helpful, they were life-saving. A woman, perhaps in her early 30s, managed the group's supplies and resources. Keanu watched as she sorted through bags, organizing food, clothing, and personal items with care and precision. This woman, whom he thought of as Maria, demonstrated remarkable resourcefulness, finding ways to stretch limited supplies and ensure everyone had what they needed. Maria's leadership in this area was critical. She kept track of what the group had, what they needed, and when it might be time to seek out more. Her efficiency and attention to detail ensured the group could function smoothly despite scarcity. Keanu felt a deep respect for her ability to manage so much under such challenging conditions. Despite the hardships they faced, the group maintained routines that spoke of dignity and structure. Keanu noticed their commitment to hygiene, with efforts to keep their living spaces clean and organized. They washed clothes carefully when they could and took measures to maintain personal cleanliness as best they could. Evening brought quiet hours, a time when the group intentionally minimized noise and movement. Keanu understood this was both a practical and considerate measure, helping them avoid attracting attention and respecting neighbors in the surrounding community. These glimpses into the group's inner workings painted a picture of strength and solidarity. Keanu's admiration grew as he saw not just survival instincts, but a thriving community, built on mutual respect and care. Keanu continued to watch the group's daily rhythms unfold, each moment revealing deeper layers of their humanity and resilience. He saw how they relied on one another, not just for physical needs, but for emotional support and companionship. Their interactions were marked by patience, kindness, and shared responsibility. The older man, Frank, often gathered the group for quiet discussions. His leadership wasn't about authority, but about guidance and inclusion. Keanu admired the way Frank listened to everyone's voice, ensuring decisions reflected the group's collective will. Whether it was planning where to find food or managing the camp's safety, Frank's steady presence kept the group united. Sam, the medic, became a comforting figure as well. Keanu noticed how others turned to him not only for treatment, but for reassurance during moments of uncertainty or pain. Sam's quiet compassion helped ease fears and fostered a sense of security within the group. His skills went beyond medicine. He was a pillar of emotional strength. Maria's role managing supplies was essential, but it was her empathy that truly stood out. She treated each member's needs with care, aware that beyond physical necessities, the group needed hope and dignity. Keanu saw how she encouraged the group to maintain their routines and hold on to small comforts despite hardship. The group's commitment to hygiene and order was remarkable given their circumstances. Keanu observed their careful efforts to keep their shared spaces clean, to dispose of waste properly, and to maintain a respectful environment. These actions challenged stereotypes about homelessness and disorder, revealing instead a community striving for pride and self-respect. Even their quiet hours spoke to a deep respect for one another and the neighborhood. Keanu understood that living on the margins required constant negotiation between survival and consideration. The group's discipline and mutual care were a testament to their strength and humanity. This growing understanding shifted Keanu's perspective profoundly. The people living quietly in his backyard were not faithless strangers or mere statistics. They were individuals with stories, struggles, and hopes. They embodied dignity in the face of adversity. Keanu felt his empathy deepen alongside a sense of responsibility. This was no longer just a private mystery or a problem to solve. It was a shared human experience that called for compassion and action. As night fell, Keanu looked out once more at the softly glowing camp. The group's quiet presence was a living reminder that beneath hardship, the human spirit endures. This connection would guide Keanu's next steps in the story that was unfolding right outside his door. Keanu Reeves sat quietly by the window one evening, his eyes tracing the dim glow of the campfire nestled in the garden. The night was still, filled with the soft murmur of voices and the occasional crackle of wood burning low. As he watched, a moment unfolded that deepened his understanding of the people living just beyond his doorstep. One member of the group, a younger man with tired eyes and slumped shoulders, suddenly withdrew from the others. His face tightened with visible distress, his breath coming in shallow gasps. Keanu sensed the weight of unspoken pain hanging in the air, a silent struggle with fear, grief, or perhaps memories too heavy to carry alone. The response from the group was immediate and tender. Several members gathered around the young man, their voices low and comforting. They offered gentle touches, words of reassurance, and quiet companionship. One of them, likely Sam, the medic, placed a steady hand on the young man's back, checking for signs of physical distress while offering calm presence. Keanu's heart ached, witnessing this display of compassion. It was a raw and honest moment that revealed the depth of connection between these individuals. Despite their own hardships, they found strength in supporting one another, embodying resilience through community. This scene stayed with Keanu as he continued to observe the group's routines. Later that night, he noticed a woman sitting by the small campfire, reading by flashlight. The soft glow illuminated her focused face as she turned page after page with care. Books were a rare luxury here, but their presence spoke volumes. Keanu understood the power of education and knowledge. In the midst of uncertainty and struggle, the act of reading symbolized hope and a belief in better days. This small ritual reflected a commitment to growth and self-improvement, a refusal to be defined solely by circumstance. The woman's quiet dedication inspired Keanu. He saw in her the spirit of perseverance, the drive to hold on to dignity and purpose. It was a reminder that even in the darkest places, light could be found through learning and curiosity. Throughout the evening, the group shared what little food they had with generosity. Keanu watched as portions were divided carefully, ensuring that everyone received enough. No one took more than their share. Instead, the scarcity seemed to bring them closer together. They worked collectively to solve problems, from repairing torn tents to managing dwindling supplies. Their cooperation was marked by patience and respect, an unspoken agreement to face challenges as one. Keanu's admiration grew with every moment he witnessed. This was not just survival, it was an active choice to preserve humanity amidst adversity. The group's strength came from their compassion, discipline, and unwavering sense of community. As the night deepened, Keanu continued to watch the group's interactions with growing respect and emotional connection. The young man who had struggled earlier gradually found comfort among his friends, supported by the steady presence of those around him. The quiet gestures of care, the whispered encouragements, and the shared warmth of the fire created a powerful sense of belonging. Keanu reflected on the strength it took for this group to maintain such bonds in the face of hardship. Their resilience was not only physical, but deeply emotional and social. They had built a community where vulnerability was met with kindness and where challenges were faced together. The woman reading by flashlight remained engrossed in her book, a symbol of hope and determination. Keanu imagined the countless stories and lessons those pages held, knowledge that could open doors to new possibilities and a brighter future. This commitment to education, even in their difficult circumstances, revealed the group's enduring spirit. Throughout the night, Keanu observed how the group managed their limited resources with care and fairness. Food was shared generously, ensuring that no one went hungry while others had excess. The group's problem-solving skills extended beyond immediate survival to maintaining dignity and order in their daily lives. Keanu's admiration deepened as he saw the group's routines unfold. A quiet dance of cooperation, respect, and mutual aid. They upheld hygiene as best they could, cleaned their living spaces, and maintained an environment that reflected their values. This portrayal of the group challenged common stereotypes about homelessness and poverty. Instead of chaos and neglect, Keanu saw organization, pride, and humanity. Their ability to create a supportive community under difficult conditions was both humbling and inspiring. As dawn approached, Keanu sat back from the window, feeling a profound connection to these people he had only just begun to understand. The emotional depth of their lives resonated with him, reminding him of the universal need for compassion, belonging, and hope. The story unfolding in his backyard was no longer distant or abstract. It was real, alive, and deeply human. Keanu knew that his role in this narrative would be one of empathy and support, helping to bridge the gap between worlds. The resilience he witnessed was a testament to the strength of the human spirit, a light shining brightly, even in the darkest nights. Friday morning dawned quietly over Keanu Reeves's home, the gentle light filtering softly through the curtains. For a week, Keanu had observed the group living quietly in his backyard, watching their routines, noting their care, and sensing their humanity. Now, as the sun rose on this new day, he faced a choice that would define the path forward. Keanu sat in his study, the morning calm a stark contrast to the turmoil of his thoughts. For days, the idea of calling security or law enforcement to remove the group had crossed his mind. It was a practical option, one that many would consider to protect privacy and property. But with each passing hour of observation, his conviction had shifted. He reflected deeply on what he had seen. The group's respectful behavior was unlike anything he had expected. They had taken care to maintain the property, arranging furniture neatly, tending the garden with care, and keeping their living space clean and orderly. Their discipline and kindness extended not only to their surroundings, but to one another. Keanu thought about the emotional moments he had witnessed, the support given to those struggling, the commitment to quiet hours to minimize disturbance, and the way they shared scarce resources with generosity. These people were survivors, yes, but more importantly, they were a community bound by dignity and mutual respect. His heart weighed heavily with the knowledge that eviction would not solve their problems. It would only displace them again, sending them back into uncertainty and hardship. Keanu understood that compassion required more than passive observation. It demanded action, rooted in empathy. He realized that his role could be different. Rather than treating this as a security issue, he could approach it as a human one. Instead of confrontation, he could offer support. Instead of eviction, assistance. This decision marked a turning point, not just in the story unfolding outside his door, but in Keanu's own sense of social responsibility. It was a moment of humility, an acknowledgement that wealth and privilege carried with them the duty to help those in need. Keanu began to plan how he might reach out to the group. He wanted to do so personally, to listen to their stories and understand their circumstances. He hoped to build trust and offer resources that could lead to a more stable and dignified life. He was aware of the complexities involved, the potential risks, the challenges of navigating privacy and legal boundaries, but his resolve was firm. Compassion outweighed concern for propriety or fear of judgment. As he sipped his coffee, Keanu felt a quiet strength settle within him. The week of watching had revealed not just a group of homeless individuals, but a community worthy of respect and care. His decision to help was an expression of that recognition. The morning light brightened, illuminating the room and the path ahead. Keanu was ready to take the first step. Keanu stood quietly by the window, watching the soft light of dawn spill across the garden that had, over the past week, become a fragile refuge for a group of strangers. His thoughts were deep and steady, reflecting on everything he had witnessed. Their care for the space, their quiet strength, the way they looked out for one another despite hardships. The choice before him was clear, but heavy with responsibility. He knew this was not just about property or security. It was about people. Real people with stories, struggles, hopes, and dignity. Their presence was a silent plea for compassion, and Keanu's heart stirred with a determination to answer that call. The practical considerations of how to approach the group weighed on his mind. He understood that trust would need to be built slowly, with patience and humility. It was not enough to simply offer help. He needed to listen, to understand their needs and fears without judgment or assumption. Keanu thought back to his own experiences with kindness and generosity, moments when strangers extended a hand during difficult times, offering support that changed his path. Those memories fueled his resolve to be that person for these individuals, to transform observation into meaningful action. He began to research local organizations, shelters, and resources that could provide more than just temporary relief. Housing, medical care, mental health support, job training, these were the building blocks for rebuilding lives. Keanu was determined to connect the group with opportunities for lasting stability and growth. Beyond logistics, he reflected on the emotional weight of this decision. Helping these people meant acknowledging their humanity and honoring their autonomy. It meant seeing them not as problems to be managed, but as neighbors, deserving respect and compassion. The weight of privilege settled on him, not as a burden, but as a responsibility. He realized that true leadership was rooted in service and empathy, and that his influence could be a force for positive change in ways he had not fully imagined. Keanu also considered the potential challenges ahead, the skepticism of others, the legal complexities, the delicate dynamics of entering someone's space uninvited. Yet none of these outweighed his commitment to do what was right. As the morning light brightened, Keanu felt a quiet strength growing within him. This moment marked a new beginning, a shift from passive observation to active engagement. The mystery that had once been a source of unease was now a story of hope and resilience, and he was ready to be part of it. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill his lungs, steadying his resolve. Whatever happened next, he would face it with kindness, respect, and an open heart. The garden outside shimmered softly in the sunlight, a symbol of growth and renewal. Keanu knew the journey ahead would be complex, but it was one worth taking. With resolve firm, he turned from the window, ready to step into the next chapter, not just as a bystander, but as a compassionate ally. Despite Keanu Reeves' thoughtful decision to approach the situation with compassion, the events of the week had not gone unnoticed by others. Neighbors, unfamiliar with the quiet changes taking place and unsettled by unusual nighttime activity, had grown concerned. Several had made calls to local law enforcement, reporting suspicious movements, flashlights in the darkness, and unfamiliar figures on the property. On a cool Friday evening, police cars arrived quietly but with flashing lights, cutting through the calm of the residential streets surrounding Keanu's home. The arrival of law enforcement brought a new layer of tension to the unfolding story, a collision between compassion and official scrutiny. Officer Sarah Mitchell and Detective James Rodriguez were the first responders dispatched to the scene. Both were seasoned professionals accustomed to navigating complex situations, including those involving high-profile individuals and sensitive neighborhoods. They approached with a balanced mix of caution and preparedness, understanding the delicate nature of investigating complaints near celebrity homes. As they pulled up to the property, the officers exchanged brief words about the reported activity. A group of unknown individuals moving around the backyard during nighttime hours. The nature of the calls suggested possible trespassing or worse, but the specifics were unclear. Keanu himself answered the door, dressed casually but with an attentive demeanor. His expression was one of mild surprise but also openness. He greeted the officers respectfully, fully aware of the seriousness of their visit. Officer Mitchell and Detective Rodriguez introduced themselves professionally and explained the reason for their presence. They detailed the neighbors' concerns, describing reports of multiple people moving on the property with flashlights and what appeared to be tools or equipment. Keanu listened carefully, his calm demeanor reflecting his intent to cooperate. He expressed genuine confusion about the reports, explaining that he had not authorized anyone to be on the property and had been unaware of any unusual activity until recently. He invited the officers inside, offering full access to the house and grounds. Keanu made it clear that he was willing to assist in any way necessary to address the concerns and maintain the security of his home. The officers appreciated his cooperation but remained vigilant, understanding that the situation might involve complexities beyond a simple misunderstanding. They began their standard inquiry, asking questions about recent visitors, any known security breaches, and the functionality of surveillance systems. Keanu provided information about his observations over the past week, the subtle signs of presence, the rearranged furniture, and the altered lighting. He spoke carefully, mindful of the potential implications, but committed to honesty and transparency. Throughout the exchange, the atmosphere was professional but underscored by the weight of the unexpected. The officers were aware that this was not a typical call. It was a moment where law enforcement intersected with issues of privacy, compassion, and social realities. The scene set the stage for a pivotal discovery, one that would reveal the true nature of the situation and challenge assumptions on all sides. After the initial introductions, Officer Sarah Mitchell and Detective James Rodriguez proceeded with a careful sweep of the property. Their flashlights cut through the dimming light as they moved slowly across the backyard and perimeter, searching for any signs of forced entry, vandalism, or other suspicious activity. They noted the carefully arranged tents, the neatly maintained garden, and the absence of damage or disorder. Keanu followed closely, answering questions and offering access to security footage and system controls. He explained the subtle signs he had observed, the light timer alteration, and the respectful nature of the occupants as far as he could tell. The officers listened intently, their professional skepticism tempered by the unusual circumstances. As they explored the grounds, the officers discovered the small campsite that had become the heart of the mystery. Tents stood in a tidy circle, with personal belongings carefully stored, and a small, safely extinguished fire pit in the center. The scene was orderly, almost peaceful, nothing like the chaotic or dangerous situation that neighbors might have feared. Attached to one of the tents was a handwritten note addressed to Keanu Reeves. Officer Mitchell carefully unfolded the paper and read aloud its contents to the detective and Keanu. The letter was signed by a man named Kevin Patterson, and explained that a group of homeless veterans had been camping on the property for the past week. Apologizing for any concern or inconvenience caused, the note detailed that Kevin and 5 other veterans had been homeless after struggles related to their transition from military to civilian life. They had chosen Keanu's property because they felt it was safer than other locations and because of his reputation for supporting veterans. The letter expressed respect for the property and regret for the unauthorized use. Keanu was struck by the sincerity and thoughtfulness of the note. His surprise was shared by the officers, who had anticipated a more hostile or reckless scenario. The discovery challenged their assumptions, revealing a deeper human story behind the call for help. Instead of demanding immediate removal, Keanu expressed a desire to meet with the group personally. He wanted to understand their needs and explore ways to assist rather than simply displace them. The officers supported this approach, recognizing the compassion and responsibility in Keanu's response. The encounter marked a turning point. The police presence, once a source of tension and fear, became a bridge toward understanding and support. Keanu's willingness to engage openly set the tone for what would follow, a story of resilience, community, and hope emerging from the shadows. As Officer Sarah Mitchell and Detective James Rodriguez continued their search of Keanu Reeves's backyard, their flashlights illuminated a scene that challenged the usual expectations of such calls. Nestled behind the house, partially hidden by trees and the soft shadows of evening, was a carefully organized campsite. Several tents stood erect, their fabric taut and secured firmly to the ground. Inside, sleeping bags were arranged neatly, suggesting recent use and thoughtful placement. The campsite's layout formed a small circle around a contained fire pit, where ashes showed that a fire had been safely extinguished earlier. The scene was quiet but telling, no signs of disorder or haste, no scattered trash or damaged plants. Instead, the campsite reflected order, care, and respect for the surroundings. It was clear these were not careless intruders, but people striving to maintain dignity in difficult circumstances. As the officers approached the tents, Officer Mitchell's attention was drawn to a small envelope attached to one of the tent poles. She carefully unfolded the paper and began to read aloud. The note was addressed directly to Keanu Reeves, its script neat and deliberate. The letter was signed by Kevin Patterson, who identified himself as the informal leader of a group of homeless veterans. The letter explained that Kevin and 5 other veterans had been living quietly on the property for the past week. They apologized for any inconvenience or concern their presence may have caused and expressed respect for Keanu and his home. Kevin described their situation, the struggles they faced transitioning from military to civilian life, challenges in securing housing, and the need for a safe place to rest. The note emphasized that they had done their best to maintain the property, disposing of waste properly and avoiding any activities that might cause damage. The tone of the letter was respectful and sincere, reflecting a deep awareness of boundaries and an earnest desire to cause no harm. It was clear the group valued the property as a sanctuary and were grateful for the temporary safety it provided. Keanu listened intently as the letter was read, moved by the candidness and thoughtfulness it conveyed. The discovery reframed the situation entirely. What began as a potential security threat had revealed a human story of hardship, resilience, and respect. The police officers exchanged glances, recognizing that this was not a typical trespassing case, but a complex humanitarian issue. Their role shifted from enforcement to understanding, aware that compassion would be essential in the days ahead. Officer Mitchell carefully handed the letter to Keanu Reeves, watching as his eyes scanned the neatly written words with a mix of surprise, respect, and deep compassion. The note laid bare a reality that many often ignored: the plight of veterans who had served their country honorably but now faced homelessness and hardship. Kevin Patterson's words revealed a community bound not only by circumstance but by shared loyalty, respect, and an unwavering desire to preserve dignity, even in the face of adversity. Keanu read slowly, absorbing the weight of each sentence. The letter detailed how Kevin and 5 other veterans had found temporary refuge on his property after months of struggle transitioning from military service to civilian life. It acknowledged their unauthorized presence with regret and apologized sincerely for any disturbance or concern caused to Keanu or his neighbors. The note emphasized their efforts to maintain the grounds meticulously, disposing of waste properly, avoiding damage to plants, and keeping noise to a minimum. The sincerity and thoughtfulness of the letter struck Keanu profoundly. It was not the defiant note of trespassers, but the humble plea of those who understood the boundaries they had crossed and wished to honor them. The group's presence was not an act of disrespect, but a desperate search for safety and shelter, approached with a level of care that transcended the usual assumptions about people in such circumstances. The officers, too, took a moment to reflect on the gravity of the situation. This was far from a typical case of trespassing or vandalism. Instead, it was a complex humanitarian issue, demanding empathy and nuanced response. The carefully arranged campsite, the respectful behavior detailed in the note, and the visible discipline of the group underscored a community striving to survive with dignity. Keanu expressed to the officers his intention to meet with Kevin and the other veterans personally. He wished to hear their stories firsthand, to understand their struggles, and to explore how he could offer meaningful help rather than simply enforcing eviction. His approach was grounded in humility and a sincere desire to make a positive difference. Officer Rodriguez nodded in agreement, acknowledging that their role extended beyond law enforcement, to include protecting and supporting vulnerable populations. They began preparations to locate Kevin and the others, aiming to facilitate a respectful and constructive dialogue. This discovery marked a pivotal moment in the unfolding story. What had started as a potential security threat was now a profound opportunity for compassion, connection, and support. The presence of the veterans transformed the narrative, challenging assumptions and opening pathways for healing. As the night deepened, Keanu felt a profound connection to the people who had quietly found refuge in his backyard. The letter, simple yet powerful, had humanized the situation and illuminated a path forward, one rooted in empathy, respect, and hope for a better future. He understood the challenges ahead would be significant, but so was his resolve. This was no longer merely a matter of property rights or neighborhood security. It was a call to honor those who had served their country and now needed a helping hand. The story that began with suspicion and concern had evolved into a narrative of understanding and humanity, ready to unfold with honesty, kindness, and heart. Keanu Reeves arrived at the nearby park where Kevin Patterson and the 5 other veterans had temporarily relocated after the police visit. The sun was beginning its slow climb, casting a warm morning light over the green expanse. The air carried a hint of crispness, mingling with the soft sounds of birdsong and distant city noise. Keanu approached with quiet respect, aware that this was more than a casual meeting. It was a moment of connection and understanding. Kevin was waiting near a small cluster of trees, surrounded by the other men. Their faces were lined with hardship, but also marked by a quiet resilience. As Keanu stepped closer, Kevin rose to greet him, his handshake firm yet cautious. The other veterans nodded their acknowledgments, eyes filled with a mix of hope and wariness. Keanu introduced himself sincerely, expressing gratitude for their willingness to meet and his desire to listen. The group welcomed him, recognizing in his demeanor a genuine interest that went beyond charity or superficial gestures. As they settled on benches and fallen logs, the veterans began to share their stories. They spoke openly about the challenges of homelessness, how it stripped away stability, dignity, and often hope. Their voices carried pain but also strength, a testament to lives shaped by struggle and survival. Kevin shared how returning to civilian life after military service was fraught with obstacles. The transition was not just about finding a job or housing. It was a battle against invisible wounds, like PTSD, isolation, and a system that often failed to support them adequately. His words painted a vivid picture of frustration and determination. One of the veterans spoke of nights spent searching for shelter, facing rejection and cold, indifferent streets. Another described the daily fight to maintain mental health without access to consistent care. Each story added layers to Keanu's understanding, revealing the complexities behind homelessness among those who had served their country. Keanu listened intently, his expression reflecting empathy and deep respect. He asked thoughtful questions, encouraging the men to share their hopes and fears. His presence was patient and unhurried, allowing space for honesty and vulnerability. Then Kevin revealed a personal connection that added a profound dimension to the conversation. His late brother had been an engineer who worked for one of the companies Keanu supported, an innovator dedicated to creating technology that served both commercial and national interests. The brother had died in service overseas, and Kevin spoke with pride about his contributions. This revelation resonated deeply with Keanu. It was more than coincidence. It was a personal link that tied their lives together in unexpected ways. Kevin's faith in Keanu's commitment to veterans' causes was part of why they had chosen his property as a place of refuge. The bond formed in that moment transcended words. Keanu felt the weight of responsibility and the opportunity to make a real difference, grounded not just in generosity, but in shared history and respect. The conversation deepened as Kevin and the other veterans opened up about their individual struggles and collective experiences. Each man carried a story shaped by service, sacrifice, and the harsh realities of reintegration into civilian life. Keanu listened with a quiet intensity, absorbing the pain, resilience, and hope woven into their words. One veteran spoke of the isolation that followed his return from deployment, the feeling of being unseen and misunderstood by those around him. He described nights battling nightmares and days filled with the challenge of finding steady work and housing. His voice held both sorrow and determination, a testament to the complex nature of healing. Another shared how physical injuries sustained in service made daily life a constant battle, compounded by the lack of adequate medical care and support. The frustration of navigating bureaucratic systems that often failed to meet their unique needs was palpable. Yet amid this, there was a strong thread of perseverance, a refusal to give up despite overwhelming odds. Keanu felt a growing admiration for the men's strength and the solidarity that bound them together. Their mutual support went beyond mere survival. It was a community built on trust, respect, and shared understanding. They had created a family in the face of adversity. As the conversation turned toward the future, the veterans expressed hopes for stable housing, meaningful employment, and access to mental health resources. They spoke of the desire to rebuild lives, contribute to society, and reclaim the dignity that hardship had threatened to steal. Keanu responded with compassion and resolve, acknowledging the systemic challenges they faced and pledging to help connect them with resources and support networks. He emphasized that their stories deserved to be heard and that their sacrifices as veterans commanded respect and action. The personal connection Kevin had revealed earlier added a deeper layer to Keanu's commitment. Knowing that one of the veterans' family members had contributed to the company he supported made the cause more tangible and urgent. It was no longer an abstract issue, but a personal mission. The meeting ended with a sense of cautious optimism. Keanu thanked the group for their honesty and bravery in sharing their stories. He promised to work alongside them, not as a distant benefactor, but as a partner in their journey toward stability and healing. As Keanu walked away from the park that morning, he felt the weight of responsibility, but also the power of connection. This encounter had transformed his perspective and ignited a determination to be a force for positive change. The bonds formed in that quiet park were the foundation for a new chapter, one where compassion met action and where hope began to take root. Keanu Reeves understood that the conversations and observations over the past week, while meaningful, were only the first steps in a much longer journey. The veterans, Kevin Patterson and the 5 others, deserved more than temporary shelter or passing sympathy. They deserved a true chance to rebuild their lives with dignity and hope. With that conviction, Keanu made a solemn and heartfelt commitment to provide permanent housing for each veteran. He recognized that a stable, secure home was the cornerstone of healing and rebuilding. It was the foundation from which they could regain control over their lives and begin to envision a future beyond survival. But Keanu also knew that housing alone would not be enough. The scars of military service ran deep, both visible and invisible. Many veterans face battles with PTSD, physical injuries, and emotional trauma long after their service ends. Access to consistent and compassionate mental health care was essential to support their recovery. Beyond health, reintegration into civilian life demanded new skills and opportunities. Keanu pledged to create pathways for job training and education, tailored to the veterans' unique experiences and aspirations. Meaningful employment was not just about income, it was about restoring purpose, confidence, and self-worth. To turn these commitments into reality, Keanu reached out to reputable veteran support organizations known for comprehensive care. He forged partnerships that would coordinate housing, medical treatment, counseling, employment training, and ongoing social support. This holistic approach was designed to address the full spectrum of challenges faced by veterans transitioning from military to civilian life. Recognizing the urgency, Keanu arranged for immediate accommodations, securing private and safe temporary housing for Kevin and the others while long-term plans were developed. These arrangements were handled with utmost respect for their privacy and autonomy, ensuring the veterans felt empowered rather than displaced. Throughout this process, Keanu chose to keep the story private. There was no press release, no public announcement, just quiet action motivated by genuine compassion. He believed that true kindness did not seek attention or accolades, but worked humbly to change lives behind the scenes. This decision to maintain privacy highlighted the authenticity of Keanu's commitment. It was not about fanfare or social media recognition. It was about human connection and responsibility. It was a reminder that the most profound transformations often happen in silence, away from the spotlight. Keanu reflected deeply on what true security meant, not the cameras, fences, or alarms that many rely on, but the creation of communities built on empathy, understanding, and shared care. This story had shown him that compassion and action were the real foundations of safety. Looking back on the week's journey, from the initial mysterious signs in his garden to the emotional meeting in the park, Keanu felt a profound sense of purpose. The experience had transformed his perspective and fueled a desire to be an active participant in healing the wounds he had witnessed. He felt honored to play a part in this private transformation, a testament to the power of kindness, responsibility, and humanity. It was a story that would remain close to his heart, a reminder that sometimes the greatest impact comes from quietly standing alongside those in need. In the days following his decision, Keanu Reeves dedicated himself fully to fulfilling the promises he had made to Kevin Patterson and the other veterans. He worked tirelessly to ensure that each man would have a safe, permanent home, a place where they could regain their footing and begin rebuilding their lives without fear or uncertainty. Keanu understood that providing shelter was only the first step. True healing required a holistic approach, one that addressed physical health, emotional well-being, and meaningful opportunity. He partnered with local veteran organizations, mental health professionals, and job training centers to build a network of comprehensive support tailored specifically to their needs. These partnerships were more than formal arrangements. They were collaborations rooted in trust and mutual respect. Keanu took an active role in overseeing the development of individualized plans for each veteran, ensuring their unique challenges were met with appropriate resources. For those coping with PTSD or other service injuries, Mental health care was prioritized, with ongoing counseling and therapy options made accessible and stigma-free. Job training and educational programs were tailored to their interests and past experiences, designed to open doors to fulfilling employment. Keanu's involvement was personal and hands-on. He met regularly with the veterans, encouraging their progress and celebrating every success, no matter how small. Despite the significant attention the story might have drawn, Keanu was firm in his decision to keep the transformation private. He believed genuine compassion required discretion, allowing those receiving help the space to heal and grow without the pressures of public scrutiny. This privacy preserved dignity and fostered an environment where the veterans could focus on rebuilding their lives on their own terms. The private nature of the effort also underscored Keanu's humility. He understood that true acts of kindness often go unseen, fueled by sincere commitment rather than the desire for recognition. The work was deeply rewarding, not because it was publicized, but because it was meaningful. Through this journey, Keanu's understanding of security and community evolved profoundly. He recognized that the walls, cameras, and alarms designed to protect property paled in comparison to the security found in empathy, connection, and shared responsibility. Real safety came from fostering environments where vulnerable individuals were supported and empowered. Reflecting on the week that had started with mysterious sounds in his garden and culminated in this quiet transformation, Keanu felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The experience challenged his assumptions, deepened his compassion, and reinforced his belief in the power of human connection to create change. As the story closes, viewers are reminded of the profound impact that kindness and responsibility can have on individuals and communities. It is a call to see beyond surface judgments, to embrace empathy, and to recognize the shared humanity in us all. Keanu's private commitment serves as a powerful example, a testament to the fact that real change often begins in quiet acts of courage and compassion, away from the spotlight, but with lasting effects that ripple far beyond.